Hi, I'm Lynn Wilson. I'm Communications Strategist for Horizon Stewardship. Today I'm sitting with Cliff Christopher, who's founder of Horizon Stewardship, to talk about his book, God versus Money. So Cliff, talk to me about this book. What motivated you to write this book?
Well, several things, Lynn. The real motivation came after a conversation that I had with several men. We were gathered together, just really talking about whatever. Realized that all four of us who are active in the church had sons, and somebody raised the issue of what we hoped our sons would become. Where would their life go? And we kind of pondered that for a while, and then one of the guys suggested right off, and he mentioned that he really hoped that his son would be very comfortable financially, that he would achieve a position in business. I think he actually said his own business that he wanted to hand down to him, and could raise his children with not so many of the struggles that the dad had gone through. Second one kind of chimed in and said, well, I'm sort of likewise, except it's not business with me. And he said, my kid has really shown a lot of promise playing baseball, and it's what he wants to be and do. And I hope someday he gets called into the majors and that he gets a chance to really star on the big stage. That would really be fantastic. I was sitting there trying to think of something just magnificent, and I couldn't feel good about anything really. And finally I said something like, I really hope he grows up to be a really fine husband and a fine father and is able to raise some wonderful children. The fourth guy had not spoken. He happened to actually be a business administrator at a local church. And he'd sat there with us and he said, I hope my son becomes a tither. And every one of us just kind of fell back in our chair. A tither? And then he went on to say, when I look at what will bring fulfillment and real happiness, it's not going to be in what he acquires. It's going to come from how he learns to give. And I think if he can become a tither, then he will have learned what the real important things are in life and not succumb to things that are really of minor importance. Well, all of us felt pretty guilty. But I left and went back from that meeting, and I just kept hearing that over and over and over again. And I realized that what we are in our society is an incredible struggle between the call to us and really the constant advertisement that stuff is going to do it for us. If we can get one more promotion, if we can just get a few more dollars, if we can attain one more thing, we're going to be happy, we're going to be fulfilled. Life is going to be lived as it was created to be lived. And we have been doing that for centuries, and as social media and other ways of communication have grown, it simply made it easier for the argument about stuff to keep coming to us, even though when we look back in history, we see it's failed. It's failed every time. And I thought, how do we counter that? And who counters that? Who's at work to defeat this? And there isn't anybody except for the church. The message of the church, that life was given to us by God, that we would be stewards of all that is His, that we would give Him credit for what is done instead of ourselves, that we learn how to give and not take and keep. That's the key to happiness. And so I began to ponder how to put that into a book, and it seemed to me this constant invasion into our lives that was coming, and it began to just sort of feel like a war. The church was getting 1 hour a week, and the other side, the enemy, if you will, was getting countless hours every week. And if we didn't do something, our society was going to crumble in the face of it. So this book was kind of written almost and with military analogy, that we've got to take it that seriously. We have to realize that our society, as we have it today, is in serious jeopardy. And I think the greatest threat to it is this idea that stuff is going to save us. And the answers to that are spiritual. And it's our churches that need to bring that spiritual message that there is another way. And I wanted to lay out for them what that way is in this book. Yeah, and that's why I call it God versus money. And I think in the introduction, I'm not sure exactly where, but I said, and so far money's winning. And that's what I hope we can overcome, that in this book we can give strategies and concepts that the church will come to learn, pastors, lay leaders, and others, as to how they can defeat this enemy.
So Cliff, in this book, you use a military analogy to help explain the financial life of a local church.
Yeah.
What's helpful about the military analogy to you?
Well, it's helpful to me, Lynn. First, I spent nearly 2 decades as either an Army reservist or I was on active duty several times, one of which was during the Gulf War, Desert Shield and Desert Storm. And so my own background has that in it. And so naturally, I put those concepts kind of together. And when I began to sense and feel that we frankly were under attack from a materialistic society that needed to be addressed with a sense of urgency, almost like a war, so to speak, just my military background sort of kicked in, and I saw how it relates together, and so I used that theme, running throughout. I hope I did it in such a way that even those who've never been in the military or been there can certainly come to understand what I'm doing. This is not a book written for soldiers and sailors and airmen. It's a book written for the church, but it does use that language that was very much a part of my past. I just wanted to communicate, we can't sit around and wait for this to fix itself. We, the church, have got to go on the offensive against that which has been on the offensive against the message of the church for a long, long time.
In the book, you use a metaphor, continuing this military connection, of a pastor as drill instructor.
Right.
Talk about that.
Well, one of my military experiences was working with basic training units, and we've all seen that, whether we've been in it or not. We've seen the scenes on television or in other places or movies about how the drill instructor is. One of the things that the Army does is that they have these persons called drill instructors that meet the recruits, these raw recruits, that I have no idea what this life is all about people, right at the point of the bus. And they take control of their life in every form and fashion. And one of the things that they do and that they say is they will model the behavior that the recruits are to follow. They don't say you're going to get up at 4 o'clock. They got up at 3:30 to go wake the recruit up at 4 o'clock. They don't say you're to shine your shoes. They say your shoes are to look exactly like mine. They don't say your uniform is to be clean and neat and put on in this particular way, and here's where you wear this or that. They wear all of that. They don't say you're to go out and run 2 miles, and I'm going to sit here in this lazy boy chair with a stopwatch, and you come back to me. They go out and lead the run. This is what we need our pastors to do. We have got to have them modeling the behavior of a steward in their whole life. Not just that we've got a pledge campaign and I'm going to pledge, but their whole life needs to be that of what a disciple is all about. That these new Christians, persons who are new coming into the life of the church, can look to that pastor and get to know what it is that Christ is talking about and what their mission is to be about, and also to see, hopefully, the joy, the fulfillment, the satisfaction that living that life, and only that life, can truly bring. I guess I've worked with hundreds upon hundreds of pastors. And I've seen some of the finest stewards that we have, and their churches become churches where giving and generosity is exemplary. At the same time, I have seen pastors who have actually come to me and said, I'm not a giver. I've never done that, don't intend to do that, and I don't want you to expose me. Don't let others know. These are pastors who brag about not knowing about the giving of their members because they don't want their members to know about their own. They don't talk or preach about money because they're uncomfortable with it. in their own personal lives. We have got to have leaders in this field. We've got to have leaders whose personal lives with their own debt situation is in order. We've got to have leaders whose giving lives are also directed and are in order. So I hope our pastors can learn a little something from the drill instructor, and that they can go out and model, and at the same point, help other laypersons to rise to that level to where they can be models as well.
Do you think that pastors get, not worn out is the right word, but they get fatigued from doing that? Would that be a fair statement? Like maybe some maybe have never understood this. Some perhaps understand it for a time, but the kind of battle fatigue, if you will, after a while.
Yeah, I mean, battle fatigue's real with our clergy. I don't think there's any question. There are things we must do to take care of ourselves. Any good officer who's got hundreds of folks following him knows he has to find some peers that he can go to and unwind, that there needs to be somebody that he can say to, man, I was scared, or I'm hurting, or whatever. But he can't do that, with his troops. But it's real, but you still have to model. You cannot, it will not work asking him to do what you're not willing to do.